1938, a couple named Hahn were strolling along the rugged riverbank in the small Texan town of London. Yes, London, Texas. They stumbled upon a peculiar stone. A section of wood, seemingly an ordinary stick, protruded from a chunk of sandstone, firmly embedded within the rock. They took the stone home as a memento, placing it on their mantelpiece, where it remained for nearly a decade. No one paid it much attention until 1947, when the couple's son decided to split the rock. What he discovered inside sent a chill down his spine. A wooden handle, fused with the stone, led to a perfectly formed metal shaft, clearly man-made. It was a hammer. At first glance, it appeared to be a common hammer, with a wooden grip and an iron head. However, it had been encased within rock dated by initial estimations to be between 100,000 and 300,000 years old. This was deemed impossible. Humans did not craft iron hammers 300,000 years ago. In fact, they did not work with metal at all at that time. 300,000 years ago, Earth was inhabited by Neanderthals who struggled to shape stones. Yet here was a hammer, entombed in ancient strata, as if someone had left it behind long before our civilization emerged. This discovery, christened the London Hammer, became one of the world's most renowned and contentious artifacts, inspiring countless books, articles, and viral videos. Some interpreted it as evidence of a sophisticated ancient civilization, others as proof of extraterrestrial visitation, and a third group attributed it to a dating error. But before we delve into who might be correct, let us examine a broader phenomenon, as the London Hammer is far from the sole inexplicable artifact unearthed over the past 2 centuries. There are dozens, each posing the same uncomfortable question to science. What if we are missing something crucial about our past? We begin with objects found in contexts where they seemingly do not belong, so-called out-of-place artifacts, or OOP arts in scientific jargon. This term was coined by American naturalist Ivan T. Sanderson in the 1960s. Since then, it has become a staple in the lexicon of both alternative history proponents and skeptics. An OOP art is any item discovered within a geological or archaeological setting that contradicts established chronological timelines. An iron nail found inside a lump of coal, a gold chain embedded in a coal seam, a concrete wall discovered 100 meters below ground. Each such find is like a splinter in the finger of academic science, not fatal, but impossible to ignore. Let us return to the London Hammer and dissect it, quite literally. What we know for certain is that the hammer is real. It exists. It can be seen and touched at the Museum of Creation Evidence in Glen Rose, Texas. This modest private museum, established by creationist Carl Baugh, uses the hammer as purported proof that the Earth is only thousands of years old, not billions. But more on that later. The hammer itself measures approximately 15 centimeters in length, with the metal head roughly 6 centimeters in diameter. The wooden handle is partially fossilized, indicating prolonged exposure to a mineral-rich environment. Analysis of the metal component reveals an alloy composed of approximately 96% iron, 2.5% chlorine, and less than 1% sulfur. This composition is unusual. Chlorine in such quantities is not typically found in modern alloys, which has fueled the most fantastical interpretations. Proponents of an ancient civilization point to several factors. Firstly, the hammer was found within rock estimated to be hundreds of thousands of years old, suggesting the hammer is at least as ancient. Secondly, the metal's composition does not match any known modern alloy, implying it was created with an unknown technology. Thirdly, the wooden handle's partial carbonization suggests extreme age. The conclusion drawn is that someone fashioned an iron hammer hundreds of thousands of years ago, when, according to official accounts, no beings capable of metalworking existed on Earth. Does this sound convincing? On the surface, it does. But let us consider the counter-arguments from the skeptics, which include virtually all professional geologists and archaeologists, and are equally compelling. The primary objection concerns the rock itself. The age of the stone and the age of the object encased within it are not necessarily the same. Geologists are well aware of the process by which mineralized water seeps through the ground, forming a hard shell of sandstone or limestone around any object. This phenomenon is known as concretion. An object could be relatively recent, perhaps only 100 or 200 years old, but if it is situated in a suitable geological environment, a stony casing, indistinguishable from rock millions of years old, can form around it within decades. In other words, while the rock encasing the hammer may be ancient, it does not definitively mean the hammer was buried within it for 300,000 years. It could have fallen into a fissure, been covered by sediment, and acquired a mineral crust within a reasonable time frame. Other issues arise as well. The hammer was not discovered during professional excavation. It was found by a couple walking along a riverbank, without witnesses, without proper documentation of its stratigraphic context, and without in situ photography. In archaeology, context is paramount. An object removed from its context loses 90% of its informational value. We do not know its depth, the specific rock layer it was in, or what other objects were nearby. All we know is that someone found a rock with a stick sticking out and brought it home. This is not a scientific discovery. It is a serendipitous find, whose interpretation is entirely dependent on the observer. Regarding the metal's composition, the high chlorine content is indeed unusual, but not entirely inexplicable. Chlorine could have permeated the iron from the surrounding environment, such as salt water or minerals within the rock. Corrosion in a chlorine-rich environment can alter the chemical composition of metal beyond recognition over centuries. A geochemist would confirm that a hammer lying for 100 to 200 years in mineralized Texas soil could plausibly acquire such a composition. And now for the most intriguing aspect. Stylistically, the hammer is perfectly consistent with tools used by American miners and farmers from the mid to late 19th century. Its shape, size, and the proportions of the head and handle are all typical of hand tools from that period. During the 19th century, Texas was actively involved in mineral extraction, and miners frequently lost tools in karst fissures, eroded riverbanks, and abandoned shafts. A hammer lost around 1850, falling into a crevice in limestone bedrock, could easily have acquired a mineral crust over 150 years, making it appear as though it had been encased in the rock from the outset. However, and this is a crucial caveat, the skeptical version is also not definitively proven. No one has conducted a comprehensive radiocarbon analysis of the wooden handle. No one has examined the surrounding rock using methods capable of precisely determining whether the stone casing formed around the hammer or if the hammer was originally within the rock. Carl Baugh, the museum's owner, denies independent researchers access to the artifact, which, understandably, fuels suspicion from both sides. Skeptics claim he is concealing the hammer for fear of exposure, while proponents of alternative history suggest that mainstream science is afraid of the truth. Consequently, the London hammer remains in limbo, neither proven nor disproven, a perfect artifact for perpetual debate. But the London hammer is merely the tip of the iceberg. Let us delve deeper, quite literally. In 1885, a coal mine in the Austrian town of Schondorf yielded an object that came to be known as the Salzburg parallelepiped. A worker splitting a piece of tertiary lignite, dating between 2 and 65 million years old, discovered a small, almost perfectly cubical metal object with a deep groove around its perimeter. The object weighed approximately 700 grams and, according to analysis, was made of iron with traces of nickel and carbon. The find caused a sensation. A metal cube inside coal millions of years old was even more inconceivable than the hammer in sandstone. Austrian scientists examined the object, publishing articles, and opinions diverged. Some theorized it was a meteorite. Iron-nickel meteorites can indeed possess unusual shapes. Others pointed to the groove, deeming it too regular for a natural formation and insisting on its artificial origin. The object was exhibited at the Linz Museum, then disappeared from display and was long considered lost. It was later rediscovered in storage and re-examined. It was determined to be, most likely, a cast iron counterweight from 19th century mining equipment, which had accidentally fallen into the coal seam during mine development. The initial theory of a million-year-old artifact, however, had already spread worldwide and continues to live on in books and websites that disregard scientific verification. The story of the Salzburg parallelepiped illustrates an important principle. Impossible artifacts often result from contamination or the intrusion of modern objects into ancient geological layers. Mines, quarries, and construction sites are all places where rock strata are disturbed and mixed, allowing an object from one century to easily end up in the rock of another. Archaeologists call this intrusion, where a modern object is introduced into an ancient context. If the observer fails to document the intrusion process, they may mistake the result for an anomaly. However, some artifacts are not so easily explained by contamination. One of the most enigmatic is the Antikythera mechanism. In 1901, Greek sponge divers discovered the remains of an ancient Roman ship on the seabed near the island of Antikythera, which had sunk around 70 BCE. Among amphorae, statues, and coins, they brought to the surface a green, corroded piece of bronze. Initially, no one paid it much attention, deeming it just another fragment. But as scientists began to clean it, they uncovered a system of over 30 bronze gears precisely interlocking. It was a mechanism, complex and multi-staged, crafted with a precision thought impossible for antiquity. Deciphering the Antikythera mechanism took over 100 years. Using X-ray tomography and computer modeling, scientists determined it was an analog computer designed to calculate the positions of the Sun, Moon, and the 5 planets known at the time. It could predict solar and lunar eclipses, track the Olympic cycle, and even account for the unevenness of the Moon's orbit. Nothing of comparable complexity appeared in Europe until the 15th century, 1,000 years later. The Antikythera mechanism is not an impossible artifact in the same sense as the London hammer. Its age is not disputed, and its origin is understood. Ancient Greece, approximately the 2nd century BCE. However, it is impossible in another way. It demonstrates a level of technological development that, according to prevailing views, should not have existed in that era. This prompts reflection on how much knowledge and technology has been lost through centuries of dark ages, invasions, and fires. The Antikythera mechanism is a perfect illustration of a crucial idea. Technological progress is not linear. We are accustomed to thinking of humanity's advancement from simple to complex, from stone axes to smartphones, as a straight upward trajectory. But real history unfolds differently. Civilizations rise, flourish, and then collapse, taking with them knowledge, technology, and skills. The Romans could construct concrete domes that have stood for 2,000 years. After the fall of Rome, this secret was lost for centuries. The ancient Egyptians possessed stoneworking techniques that we still do not fully comprehend today. Damascus steel, Greek fire, the Antikythera mechanism, these are all technologies that were created, utilized, and subsequently lost. But there is an immense chasm between a lost technology and a civilization 300,000 years old. The Antikythera mechanism is astonishing, but it does not violate the laws of physics or contradict fundamental chronology. It shows that the ancient Greeks were more ingenious than we presumed, but it does not suggest that an unknown civilization existed on Earth hundreds of thousands of years prior to our era. Such a claim requires entirely different evidence. Nevertheless, there are other enigmas that are not so easily dismissed. In South Africa, in mines near the town of Ottosdal, miners for decades discovered peculiar metallic spheres within layers of pyrophyllite, rock estimated to be approximately 2.8 billion years old. The spheres, ranging from 2.5 to 10 centimeters in diameter, possessed an incredibly smooth surface, and some featured fine parallel grooves around their equator, as if etched on a lathe. Photographs of these spheres circulated globally, and theories proliferated, from petrified alien eggs to evidence of a civilization 3 billion years ahead of ours. Reality, as is often the case, proved more prosaic. Geologists determined that the spheres were natural concretions formed by mineral deposition around a crystallization nucleus. The parallel grooves are traces of mineral layering with varying compositions. Nature is capable of creating astonishingly regular forms without any intelligent intervention. Snowflakes, crystals, the salt columns, and the South African spheres now join this list. Consider, too, the mysterious Baghdad batteries. These are clay vessels containing copper cylinders and iron rods found in Iraq and dated to the Parthian period, approximately 2,000 years ago. When an acidic solution, such as vinegar or grape juice, was poured into the vessel, a potential difference arose between the copper and iron. The device functioned as a rudimentary galvanic battery. Why would ancient Parthians need electricity? One theory suggests it was for electrolytic gold plating on jewelry. Another posits they were not batteries at all, but containers for sacred scrolls, and the electrical effect was a mere coincidence. The debate remains unresolved to this day, and the Baghdad batteries remain one of the most intriguing artifacts at the boundary between the impossible and the improbable. And here we arrive at the most compelling question. What if such evidence does exist? What if impossible artifacts are not dating errors or contamination, but genuine traces of something we do not understand? Proponents of this idea, including individuals with academic degrees, build their arguments on a simple statistical observation. There are too many impossible artifacts for them all to be mistakes. Dozens of metallic objects in coal seams, strange impressions in rock, inexplicable structures. While each individual case can be explained by contamination or error, the cumulative effect, they argue, points to a pattern. It's like finding one coin at the ocean's floor. Random. 10 coins, a coincidence. 100 coins, a shipwreck. The question is, have enough coins been gathered to reveal the shipwreck? Critics rightly respond, no, not enough. And here's why. Firstly, the majority of impossible artifacts were found in the 19th or early 20th centuries, when scientific documentation standards were far from modern. No one photographed the finds in situ, took samples of the surrounding rock, or invited independent experts. We're dealing with narratives, often retold through intermediaries rather than scientific data. Secondly, there is a powerful selection bias. Books and films are written about impossible artifacts, while the thousands of instances where a mystery was solved and proved to be mundane receive no such attention. No one will watch a 2-hour film titled, "It Turned Out to Be an Ordinary 19th Century Hammer." Conversely, a film called Artifact from 300,000 Years Ago would garner millions of views. This skew creates the illusion that impossible artifacts are more prevalent than they actually are. Thirdly, and perhaps the strongest argument from skeptics, if a technologically advanced civilization existed on Earth 300,000 years ago, it would have left behind not just one hammer, but millions of traces. Building foundations, mining spoil heaps, soil contamination, atmospheric changes detectable in ice cores. Our current civilization has existed for only a few thousand years, and its traces are visible everywhere, from microplastics in ocean depths to radioactive isotopes in Antarctic glaciers. A civilization existing hundreds of thousands of years ago would have left an analogous or even more significant geological footprint. We see none of this in rock formations, ice cores, or ocean sediments. One hammer is an anomaly. The absence of everything else is a refutation. However, a group of scientists proposes an elegant way out of this impasse. They do not claim that a civilization existed on Earth 300,000 years ago. They ask a different question. Would we be able to detect it if it had existed? In 2018, astrophysicist Gwyn M. Schmidt and astrobiologist Adam Frank published a scientific paper titled The Silurian Hypothesis, named after a fictional reptilian race from the television series Doctor Who. In it, they posed the question, suppose an industrial civilization existed on Earth millions of years before humans appeared. What traces would it have left in the geological record? The answer proved surprising. Almost none. After 10 million years, even concrete buildings would have turned to dust. Plastics would have decomposed, metals oxidized and dissolved in the rock. The only things that might have survived are anomalies in the chemical composition of sedimentary rocks. A carbon spike from burning fossil fuels, traces of synthetic chemicals, changes in isotopic ratios. It is precisely these anomalies, not hammers and nails, that should be sought if we wish to test the hypothesis of a Precambrian civilization. The Silurian hypothesis is not an assertion that such a civilization existed. It is a methodological exercise. Scientists are asking if we are searching correctly, and the answer is, not entirely. Our geology is focused on finding fossils and minerals, not on searching for evidence of industrial activity in the deep past. These traces might exist, but we simply do not know how to recognize them or are not looking in the right places. All of this brings us back to the London Hammer and similar artifacts. Are they proof of an ancient civilization? Almost certainly not. Are they intriguing mysteries? Absolutely. Are they a reason to ask the right questions? Absolutely. Because the true value of impossible artifacts lies not in the artifacts themselves, but in their ability to make us contemplate the limits of our knowledge. We inhabit a planet 4.5 billion years old. Our civilization has existed for a mere few thousand years, a blink of an eye on a geological timescale. We have studied a negligible fraction of Earth's crust, a negligible fraction of the ocean floor, a negligible fraction of ice cores. To claim we know everything about our planet's past is an arrogance that science cannot afford. The hammer from London, Texas, most likely belonged to some 19th century miner or farmer. It fell into a fissure, acquired a mineral crust, and was discovered 100 years later by a couple walking by the river. This is the simplest explanation, and, by Occam's razor, the most probable. But even this is important. This explanation is not proven. It has not been tested. The hammer has never undergone thorough independent examination. And as long as this remains the case, it will continue to be what it has been for the last 80 years, a perfect screen onto which everyone projects their beliefs. Creationists see in it proof of a young Earth. Lovers of alternative history see the trace of an ancient civilization. Skeptics see an ordinary hammer in an unusual wrapper. And scientists see a reminder that even the simplest things can be more complex than they appear. Ultimately, the story of impossible artifacts is a story about ourselves, our need to believe in miracles, our fear of the unknown, our desire to know that we are not the first intelligent beings on this planet, that someone was here before us, that we are not alone in the vastness of time. The hammer embedded in the stone isn't a solution, it's an enigma. Perhaps that's precisely its captivating power. It enthralls us not because we've identified its maker, but precisely because we haven't, and likely never will. But what, I wonder, is the most striking irony in this entire narrative? Imagine if millennia from now another civilization unearths the remnants of ours. They'll discover countless remnants. Discarded plastic containers, monolithic concrete structures, radioactive waste, and orbiting artificial satellites. They'll have no uncertainty that we once inhabited this world. However, if a preceding civilization existed, one devoid of plastic, nuclear power, or anything of that magnitude, what vestiges could they possibly have left behind? Perhaps merely a single hammer lodged in rock, resting by a Texan riverbank. A minuscule, unconvincing, debated relic, one we've stumbled upon yet failed to decipher. It's this very notion, not concrete proof, but the sheer contemplation that renders such improbable artifacts so utterly compelling. They serve as a profound reminder that 4.5 billion years represents an unfathomably vast expanse of time, and that our understanding of this duration is merely a fragile, tenuous film stretched across an immeasurable abyss.